thanks again for being with us today. I'm going to introduce three filmmakers who are here with us today. We're going to talk about what they're going to be showing at the film festival, and we'll talk a little bit about their craft and pose these questions about the direction, the new directions that filmmaking is taking, and also talk about the Latino experience in all of this and how this is creating a new space, an expanded space for Latino storytellers. So let's start by introducing Alex Rivera. He's a filmmaker who has been telling new and urgent and visually adventurous stories for more than 20 years now. His first feature film, Sleep Dealer, won multiple awards at the 2008 Sundance Film Festival and the Berlin International Film Festival. His second film, a documentary scripted hybrid, was The Infiltrators. And that one won both the Audience Award and the Innovators Award in the next section at the 2019 Sundance Film Festival. It's also currently being developed as a scripted series by Blumhouse Productions. And Alex studied at Hampshire College. He was the Rothschild Lecturer at Harvard University, and he's currently a distinguished lecturer of media studies at Queens College. Also with us is Priscilla González Sainz. She's an award-winning writer and filmmaker who specializes in nonfiction media. As a first-generation American, she is interested in exploring themes of displacement, identity, and transnationalism. Priscilla earned her MFA in documentary film and video from Stanford University. Her thesis film is Room 140, and that was a Student Academy Award semifinalist, and it was nominated for the IDA Wolper Student Documentary Achievement Award. And finally with us today as well is, we have Moni Vargas. Moni is an Afro-Mestiza. I love that phrase. She's an Emmy-nominated filmmaker and artist whose work spans music, theater, and photography. Her creative partners have included Will Smith's Overlook and Westbrook Entertainment, Vice, the Stanley Nelson's Firelight Media, Sony Pictures, Black Public Media, Apple Music, and Paramount Network. She's directed an array of music videos, fashion editorials, short documentaries, commercials, and educational content. In 2012 and 2017, Moni produced and directed the Red Table Talk pilots for Ida Pinkett Smith, which were broadcast on Facebook Live. And that first episode, by the way, got over 31 million views on Facebook Watch. So I think we have a pretty dynamic panel here with us today. We're going to talk about films, filmmaking, journalism, art, hopefully touch on everything a little bit. And to let you know a little bit of my background in this whole thing, you know, I told you that I've been with the Double Exposure Film Festival now for going on 5 years. But I'm also the PBS public editor. So in that capacity, I work with documentary filmmakers from throughout the spectrum. And one of the other exciting things I do in my spare time is I'm an advisor to the IDA's Enterprise Fund. So that's a little bit of my cred. And I think that it kind of gives you an idea where I'm going to be coming from with my questions. So let's go to that right now. And I'm going to ask each of you to talk a little bit about the films that you're presenting at the film festival, but also tell me what it is that moves you and drives you in this direction, which I call the beautiful hybrid, journalism and filmmaking. So let's see, Priscilla, let's start with you. Stanford, wow, and now here. So let me know what brought you to the film festival, what you're going to be showing at the film festival, and what drives you as an artist.
Thank you so much, Ricardo, and thank you everybody on the panel and people for coming out to hear us. So the film I'm presenting is called Status Pending. It's a 26-minute documentary film. This film is a portrait, a look at the lives of 5 first-generation Mexican-American immigration lawyers in Los Angeles who created an informal support group And so it's a look into what it's been like to do their job, the effects not only on their clients who are also featured in the film, but just how the work comes home with them, and with these constant changes and attack on immigration and immigrants. Sort of a look at what that is like being on that side of it. I was really interested in telling that story because I felt like it was something to add to this bigger conversation that we're having as filmmakers about these issues. And my sister is actually one of the 5 lawyers who's a solo practitioner. So after finishing grad school and coming back down to Southern California, she hired me to work with her for a bit while I was getting settled. And as a solo practitioner in her practice, I saw the kind of work that she was doing and just how it was affecting her personally, but also just seeing how at any moment she knew things could change. And so at some point I found out about this group that she's a part of, and it's like this text chain, and it's friends, and they're talking all day and sharing resources or jokes, a lot of silly stuff too. And so I at that moment I knew, and I think she knew, I was up to something in my mind, and I thought, like, I think there's something here, like, can I talk to everybody, like, what do you think? And after she said that was okay, I reached out to them. They were all on board. She was actually the last to be on board. And then we started filming in 2019 from about March to August. Originally it was just going to be like a day in the life, but then it just with some of these client stories, we ended up just wanting to tell more. And, you know, the timeline of immigration is so insane that, you know, it just had to be a bigger, a longer short film. And I was able to make that film with the support of If Then, the shorts program. I won the formerly Tribeca Film Institute If Then pitch at Big Sky in 2019. That was for the West Coast. And now If Then continues through Field of Vision, and they're still major supporters of the film. I also had support from Nalip, and yeah, just the amazing people that worked on the film. And just to answer the question of what do I think drives me, I feel for a long time what drove me in this direction of telling stories and of fiction and nonfiction is that I think there's just so much behind our notions of other people, our preconceptions of where these decisions come from. And I like the idea of interrogating, why do I think this about that person, or why do I feel this way? And I think that in my work, I like to try and take deep dives into really specific areas of just human experiences. In room 140, it was just a look at the night after people are released from detention centers, and just relating to anyone could end up in that situation, really, of losing their family. And so I think that's what really drives me, is just
Great.
to.
All right, thank you, Priscilla.
Mm-hmm.
Moni Vargas, welcome, and thank you for being here with us. I love this phrase, Afro Mestiza, right? You know, that says a lot. And so maybe you can explain that a little bit, but also tell us, what is the film that you're going to be presenting or working with during the film festival this week, and what brings you here? What brings you to this moment now as a filmmaker and as a journalist?
Gracias, Ricardo. It's so great to be here with everyone. Hi, Alex. Good to see you. I'm actually presenting a panel with Kimberly Bautista. I'm the moderator for the panel, and it's called Trauma-Informed Storytelling as a Portal to Heal. And we'll be speaking to fellow filmmakers who, really ask the questions about ethical storytelling, and how do we represent really the effects of violence without re-traumatizing audiences or desensitizing them. And, you know, we'll really look at the nuances that come when, you know, when you're representing women, girls, and non-binary folks of color, so that we, you know, celebrate life and joy rather than trauma, which is what we often see on our screens. I am a filmmaker. I've been a filmmaker for many years. Thank you for the long bio. But right now I'm the creative director of programs and strategy at Breakthrough. And Breakthrough is a human rights organization that uses media, arts, and tech at the intersection of immigration rights, gender equity, and racial justice. And so we are currently producing 4 different campaigns, but the main one is called Our Stories in Vivid Color. And we are featuring the lived experiences and dreams of BIPOC, Gen Z, women, girls, and gender nonconforming youth across the country and Puerto Rico, and ages 14 to 24. And we do feel that this decade is, you know, a really important one where we not only learn about our identities, but, you know, really find our way in the world. And what I've come to realize is that, you know, these young people are leading conversations that are really crucial to how we move forward, you know, as a society, and really they're having a huge impact on the not only the gender non-binary conversations, but they are, you know, full-on activists, and they are an inspiring group. So I'm really excited about that. So you asked about Afro Mestiza. You know, before all of these genetic tests, you just never really knew what your background was. And a few years ago, I had it done when I had my daughter, and I was just curious. And yeah, and you know, I'm 30% of African descent. I am, I think, 28% or 30-something% of European descent, and 25% indigenous, you know, of indigenous background. So, you know, I come from the coast of Colombia, and that is, you know, the makeup of a lot of people, but we just didn't know it because, you know, we, as you well know, you know, our colonial history tends to erase all of that, and science and technology is making that, I think, a little bit more, is allowing us to discover that background. So, so yeah, I decided
No, and I think it also presents you a great new field to explore, right, as an artist and a filmmaker. And I'm going to ask you, in a few seconds here, I'm going to ask you to about one thing that you talked about here, which is, you know, has to deal with presenting film in a way that doesn't re-traumatize or doesn't traumatize audiences. And I'm wondering how that might conflict with sometimes the stated goal of a filmmaker or an artist is to grab the attention, is to capture an idea or capture a wider audience. And sometimes, well, often we try to do that through, I'm not going to say shock value, but by presenting some strong material, right? So let's talk about that in a second. But before we do that, I want to go to Alex. Alex, bienvenido. How are you? Tell us a little bit about your role in the film festival this coming week, and what you're looking to do and what you want to get out of it, and a little bit about what you, I mean, looking at your background and all the work that you've been doing is, in my book, you're the epitome of what we're calling this new hybrid journalist filmmaker, a documentarian, right? So tell us a little bit about your work and what's coming up for you next week.
Oh, thank you. Well, first of all, just thanks to NAHJ for having me here. I've been kind of, in and out of the conference and the community for 20 years or something like that. And so it's great to be connected, and happy to know that there's a connection between the organization and Double Exposure. Thank you. And it's also great to be connected with friends. I've worked in different capacities, both with Moni and Priscilla. And so it's so cool just to see everybody. It's great to be in this community. In terms of what I'm doing, I definitely have never identified as a journalist. I guess I consider myself a storyteller, and I've worked in a lot of different mediums. I was watching this new Showtime series with Ethan Hawke playing John Brown, so it's like a kind of historical drama. And it started off with this card that said, like, this film is based on a true story. Everything that you see is true. Most of it happened. I think it's what they say, something like that. But they sort of distinguish between everything you're about to see is true. Most of it happened. And I loved that, because it sort of is my spirit with my work, which is trying to speak truth, but working in mediums that allow us to kind of play visually to elevate the form in different ways. And my own personal orientation is that truth, and you can get at truth through a lot of different means, and so I've pursued a kind of truth about the immigrant experience or the Latino experience through science fiction in one of my films, fully scripted science fiction film. The new film, The Infiltrators, is different. It has, it's a true story about undocumented youth who got themselves arrested on purpose by Border Patrol to go into a detention center to help get people out. The young folks were anti-deportation activists. And we were there filming with them, my partner, Cristina Ibarra, and I, when the true story unfolded. But because half of the story happened inside a detention center, we had to turn to actors and reenactment to kind of recreate what we're not allowed to see. So the film is kind of a hybrid of a documentary layer, real people, real time, but that cross-cuts with a reenacted version of the story on the other side of the fence. And I don't even know what it is. I guess I think it's a documentary, but it's literally about half told with actors and a script, and half documentary footage. The script is based on interviews and based on a kind of journalistic practice, but it's an experiment and an attempt to create a visual language that responds to this terrible system that has been thrust on our community. It's a sick system that we pay for with our tax dollars that doesn't allow us to even perceive it. They keep journalists out. When the journalists go into detention, they're heavily handled and monitored and limited. But all the people doing that handling and limiting of our own vision, we're paying them, And so the detention system is something, I view it as a novel kind of challenge on the American landscape for storytellers. And our film is an attempt to create a novel language to respond to that system.
Yeah.
In a sentence, what we'll be doing at Double Exposure is talking about how we raised the money for the project.
Right.
I'm doing a panel with Sundance about grant writing.
That's great. That's critical. Obviously, that's a real important discussion to have for any filmmaker, right? Is that process? Yeah, and you will know it. And you touched on I think on a note that that is really helpful here. I'll tell you, my daughter just graduated from university. She's and graduated in filmmaking. So she's a film grad, and we go back and forth because her parents are journalists, right? And she tells us, "Oh, I'm never going to be a journalist. I don't want to be a journalist." But then I ask her, Mija, I say, "Look, what are you? What do you consider yourself?" And she says, "Well, I'm a storyteller." And I tell her, "Well, you know what? That's journalism. That is exactly what we do. That's what I pride myself as a journalist. I believe that I'm a storyteller as well." And I think that today, given the evolution and the de-evolution of what we call journalism, I think we can actually look at ourselves and start redefining ourselves as storytellers, not just journalists. So you get out of the confines of that. What does that allow you to do? It allows you actually to be a storyteller and a journalist, or an activist and a journalist and a storyteller. You can bring in multiple disciplines and multiple identities into the practice of telling a good story. And I think there is a new space that's being created because of this evolution, right? And this is why I'm excited about the film festival. I'm excited about what you all are doing, and I'm wondering, you know, Priscilla, let's go back and talk a little bit about your film Room 140. You know, it sounds like it comes from a real personal connection, right? And is that a valid way of, I don't know, is it a valid way of telling a greater truth or a greater story? Is by basically turning it on the me story, right? In this case, the me is your connection to the lawyers, and you translated that into this film. Is that what it takes sometimes to tell a good story?
Yeah, thanks, Ricardo. That's a great question. I definitely think that it really depends on the story, and sometimes it's whatever feels most truth to the filmmaker, or more truthful to the filmmaker or the storyteller. I didn't put myself in either of those films, really, but definitely in the recent film Status Pending, it is my sister, so that was my way in. Um, and what that definitely did, and that personal connection really helps with building trust quicker, because even though it was my sister, it's not like automatically the relationship between someone on the camera and a director is instant. It's not. It still takes time. I think, and access. A lot of her friends who I had known over the years, but we had never done anything like this, had some familiarity with me, with my family. And I will say that I think was definitely a big part of the access of being able to be in their homes with their kids. And, you know, we're still, you know, continuing that relationship. Like, we still talk and all the time, and they are excited to like promote the film. Yeah, so I think that also, you know, I personally believe there is always a bit of yourself in any story you tell anyway, whether it's writing, a photograph, a film. Your lens is there. And so I think it's always a part of it anyway. You always bring yourself, you know, into the story. So
Right.
I know for me, yeah, both of my whole family came from Mexico, and I have heard a lot of their stories, and I know I didn't have that experience, and I know they have very different experiences than people are having now. And so just being very aware of that is as well. So the lens that I try to be aware of just the multiple histories and stories and complexities of the stories I'm trying to tell.
That's great. You know, it seems to me that the real key element of what you're talking about is access, right? Because you really want to get inside it and have a place at the table, as it were, and then be a part of conversations, be a part of experiences. And Alex, it just seems that was sort of the goal of getting in there with infiltrators, right? And you had to be a little creative when you realized that you couldn't, you know, obviously film inside, and you came up with a pretty creative solution for that. Describe that process a little bit, and some of the, perhaps, I'm not going to say ethical, but perhaps some of the more standard journalistic questions that you had to ask yourself when you were doing that.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, thank you. No, I mean, like Priscilla, we confronted access questions of the sort of like bread and butter kind, in terms of just how do you start a relationship with somebody whose story you're moved to tell. And, you know, I had seen this group, the National Immigrant Youth Alliance, the group of rebel dreamers, in the news, and emailed them after I saw them doing a series of these kind of civil disobedience actions. And I was lucky because they had seen some of my films. I had been already doing work. All of my work is kind of, like I mentioned, concerned with the border and immigration. So, and I had been doing it for 15 years by the time that I reached out to them. So they had seen, some of them knew my work. So there was a little bit of trust and dialogue there to get that first level access. I thought I was going to make a short film, like an op doc type of thing. One action, the youth meet, do it, and how does it affect everybody's life? But the group was so interesting and fast moving, and they were always escalating. And so I felt like I could never really stop and edit, and ended up filming for 2 years, off and on with this group. And then after that, and my partner Christina joined me along the way. And then after that cycle of production was done, we looked back at the footage and found this one chapter in the book, if you will, the chapter of the infiltration of this one detention center. And then we pivoted towards the challenges I mentioned earlier in terms of, okay, this is a cool story, but we didn't film half of it. How do we deal with that? And we decided to go into the challenge and resolve it the way I described with actors. But to your point about ethics, we absolutely hit a kind of ethical crisis where we were editing this footage, the documentary footage, to lay out the story, to identify the parts of it we couldn't see. And then I like to draw, so I put storyboards into the material to sort of work out, this part's documentary, this part's going to be scripted. And then we realized we'd have to write dialogue for these characters. And so all of a sudden we're sitting there thinking, like, we started a relationship with these people, these real people who thought we were going to document them. And now we're writing them. And we're writing them with reason, but what is this? And so we let them know. We told them this is what's happening. And they understood, they were into it. But then we realized, like, wow, we're writing a lot. Like, it's going to be half the movie. So we decided, we basically confronted the question to show them or not. Obviously, in a lot of journalism, you never show your article to your subject for approval. That's, I think, unethical. And in documentary practice, that's kind of also frowned upon. I don't know if there's a guidebook or a rule book, but it seems to be kind of the rules. You don't show your rough cut to the subject. But in this case, because we were scripting, we really felt like ethically we had to. It didn't feel right to draft a version of their words without them seeing it, things they say. And so we showed them this rough cut. And then both for their permission, we wanted their permission, but also for them to enrich the text. So when they saw the scenes that we were creating, they were able to feed back into it and tell me, oh, it was actually like this. And the reality was always better than what we'd made up in our heads, you know? And so we kind of crossed that border, I guess, from a sort of journalistic stance in relation to our subject to something else. Not exactly collaborative. They weren't sitting there calling the shots in the director's chair, but it was a dynamic back and forth in terms of looking at the script and kind of enriching it together.
Right. It's a pretty novel approach, I think. It's rare to see that done in such a real hybrid fashion. So, you know, this is quite interesting. And Moni, I'm looking at you and you're nodding, almost acknowledging what both Priscilla and Alex are talking about. It seems to me that you've thought a lot about this, and that actually it becomes a part of what you talk about and what you're going to be talking about on your panel in dealing with the kinds of situations, the kinds of circumstances that filmmakers find themselves in when they're practicing their art, right? Describe that for us a little bit, and to push back, or maybe to challenge a little bit about what you're talking about, just in terms of dealing with trauma. Are you specifically saying that maybe we need to go easier on an audience, or is there a bit of a line that you're drawing in that discussion?
Well, it's there are so many traumatic stories in our community, and you know, it's not to say that those stories need to stop, but I think it is important to question how we tell stories, right? And that's really what this is about. It's bringing awareness to that process. Kimberly Bautista, she is the founder of Justice for My Sister, and they are actually publishing guidelines in November that really, you know, it's almost like they're creating these guiding principles to assess whether creative work and stories are told through this like healing centered lens. The reason why I think it's important is because there's many ways to tell a story. So for example, one of our panelists, Case Peña, she is a trans Latina filmmaker, and currently her film Full Beat is on HBO. The way there's one scene where someone is beaten up, you know, is assaulted, but you don't see the actual act, you hear it. So it, you know, it takes back a bit of that re-traumatization that could happen for victims. Another one of our panelists, Loida Limbal, she is the director of Through the Night, and that's actually going to be shown at the festival. So, you know, please make sure that you watch. And, you know, Loida, she really takes on this, you know, observational, almost, she hangs back when telling the story of overnight caretakers. They're, you know, an overnight child care center in New York, and you know, her approach is really to again observe and allow the story to evolve and to, you know, tell itself, rather than you know, being very exploitative in the way that you can tell sometimes these stories. So it's just bringing a bit of awareness and really having that thought process, you know, as you're actually, you know, filming, and then, you know, as you're editing and presenting the work. So yeah, I think it is, and I'm a huge fan of Alex's films, and you know, I do know that him and Christina are always very thoughtful in their process, even as difficult as, you know, the subject matters that we're, you know, talking about and that we're documenting can be. So yeah, you know, for me, you know, in the work that I'm doing now, it's you know, we're dealing with 14 to 24-year-olds, and it is just about gaining trust and making them feel that they are safe and that they are telling their story on their own terms. And you know, not only are we doing, you know, producing these short stories with them, but we're also giving them access to workshops and to learn, you know, ways to enter the creative economy so they can continue telling their stories on their own terms, you know, so that they're not seen through a colonized lens, if you want to call it that, and so that they, you know, continue beyond the project. And I think that's really what it's about, is having folks be able to tell their own stories, because for many years that just hasn't been the case.
Yeah, and I think that what the three of you are also talking about, and which I think is pretty cool about, you know, not just double exposure, but also there's just a number of new stories that are coming out, right? And they're coming out from a real Latino perspective. Latino filmmakers, you have Latinos behind the camera, you have Latinos who are producing, helping stories get told and get on the air and get filmed. So there's this whole emerging, I would say, characteristic of a Latino filmmaker, which in a way allows us to be, or to show that we can tell stories in a different, perhaps more empathetic way. And it's a full spectrum of things, because it also helps that we're Latinos and we have access. We know how to get into the stories and get into the communities that we're going to be talking about in our stories, right? But also it allows us to present these characters and these people in perhaps a different light than in the old days, and you know, where someone would come in and it'd be like, the approach would be like someone's on safari, right? And they're coming into our community and they're showing the world what these strange creatures are, these Latinos in these communities. And so, which I think is pretty cool now, that we don't have to be as anthropological in the approach anymore. We can actually just be Latinos making films about us and the different facets of us, and which I think is kind of fun. I'm really looking forward to seeing what you guys do next week, and all the stuff that you're putting together and working on these days. But it also presents a challenge, doesn't it? I mean, because there's a convention to making films, to being a documentarian or to being a filmmaker. You have to fit in and conform to sometimes certain styles. Is that something that is changing for you guys? And I'll toss it up for, say, a jump ball. Whoever wants to jump on this one first can do so. Is the space changing a little bit now that we're challenging the norms? We're challenging the old ways of making films. Do you find that you see a difference now today?
Maybe I'll jump in real quick. I think you really put a lot on the table with those comments. I think it's a very rich set of comments. Regarding the kind of ethnographic gaze, or the colonial gaze of a lot of documentary film historically, where a person of a certain type of privilege goes into typically different kinds of unprivileged communities, documents them, runs away, structures the story the way they want to, and then profits from it. That is being questioned broadly. There's a sort of a big kind of discourse inside of documentary around that practice. But the simple fact is, Latinos, I think, I don't know, I'd be curious to see a study, but I feel like we are the group that is most powerless in terms of confronting that, and still victim to it pretty regularly in some pretty egregious ways. So I look at like the TV show Living Undocumented on Netflix, or Immigration Nation, both major documentary series produced by non-Latino directors that were with major investment, well, all the resources in the world, completely capable of hiring Latino directors, producers, but decisions being made not to, and showing our communities as, in one way or another, kind of, the subjects of a sort of reality TV kind of sort of pseudo cops kind of gaze. And we don't have the institutions to shame this type of practice. And a lot of the sort of pushback has come on social media, and tiny new organizations like the Undocumented Filmmakers Collective calling out living undocumented. But it's a real problem, and I don't know how we can develop the power to confront that kind of practice, which is both, it's an aesthetic problem, a political problem inside the work itself. It's also an employment and an equity issue in terms of who's getting these jobs and opportunities. So anyways, but I see that as a real issue and a set of questions. But I do think the form is opening up. There's also conversations, because when you start to challenge the extractive dynamic of documentary, you have to come up with something else, you know. And I don't think our film is a model. It's like a unique thing, but it was an attempt to try to resolve some of those political questions with our subjects, and that relationship, you know. And that's going to be like an ongoing conversation. But then the nexus between the creative part, the visual part, how do you structure the film, and then how do you create healthy and good relationships with the people whose story you're sharing.
Right. Hey, Priscilla, do you find yourself, I mean, do you find yourself questioning, do I have a proper place here, right? I mean, you know, we all kind of like ask ourselves, am I the right person to tell this story? I've heard from a number of journalists who are thinking about books, for example, and then they hear from agents and they hear from people in the industry who says, well, you're not the right person to tell this story. How do you get beyond that? And Moni, I think this is a good one for you too, because I mean, this is the kinds of things that you deal with, given just the richness of your experience and different parts and different aspects of filmmaking. How do we get beyond that point to show people that it's talent and that's your journalistic and your filmmaking ability, right? Have you run into that conundrum, Priscilla?
Yeah, I mean, I think I've run into that a lot in different places in my life. I mean, I have come to understand my own privilege as a white passing Latina. And sometimes, even though I enter a space and don't feel white, other people perceive me that way. And so that's something that definitely affects me, and not only in all parts of my life, but something I'm aware of when I enter a new space. I have pretty much, I've done a lot of work in Latino storytelling since I, was in college basically, and that's just the space that I'm interested in or have been interested in. I definitely believe that we all have the capacity to tell stories, even if they're not Latino stories. So I know that that's been a process for me in terms of sometimes being seen as an outsider, even when I'm not, in some cases. But definitely in the work I've done more recently, there's people who are in very vulnerable situations, and I definitely have that question all the time. I wish that there's so much more that they need than to have a film made about them, and I think it's such a huge responsibility to do this kind of work with anybody, but especially people who are in vulnerable situations. It's a big, it's definitely an unfair power dynamic to be the person behind the camera. So I think it's just it's a responsibility I take very heavily, and the people I work with, I want to work with people that feel the same way, that will, call each other out and say, yeah, maybe, how are people responding to the way we cut this scene together? Or
Right.
what do we think, sharing the work. And so, but I definitely think, to answer the question more directly, that the work speaks for itself in a lot of ways. I think that if I'm not super vocal or in some ways saying this is who I am, this is what I'm about, I've always felt like my work shows that, and maybe like the people I work with, or just who I am, even if not everybody knows that. And so to answer that question, I think it's definitely the work. And I do want to throw in, because I should have mentioned earlier that I'm on a panel next week too, for If Then.
Right.
So If Then Shorts, which is a pitch that I won last year, that funded the film, that made it possible. Incredible program started by Mirdu Chandra, now run by Caitlin May Burke and Chloe Gabai. And just to kind of tie into the other question, I mean, they're supporting short films in all kinds of formats. There's animation, there's and so and they're supporting filmmakers from any background. It's not like you have to be a certain background or ethnicity to apply, but I love that they're just supporting amazing emerging filmmakers who are just doing really interesting and different things in documentary.
Yeah,
So including a lot of Latino filmmakers. So yeah.
that's good. That's great. And Moni, we'll give you the last word on this, but do you see yourself as a Latina filmmaker or a filmmaker, or a little bit of both?
You know, it's a great question. I mean, I have to say that given the dismal representation of Latinos in front and behind the camera, you know, you have to say, yes, I'm Latina, I'm proud. You know, you kind of have to shout from the tower and say, yes, this is who I am. And I think that's where I've added the Afro Mestiza, you know, because you know, and Priscilla, thank you for, you know, acknowledging the fact that even within Latino culture, there is still, you know, there is still quite a bit of white supremacy, you know, that is, you know, a part of our media. And it's unfortunate because I can't say I ever really saw myself represented in Latino media before perhaps a few years ago, you know, maybe 10 years ago. It's like you started seeing brown people on TV or, you know, in Univision or any of these big, you know, media outlets. So yeah, I think it is important, you know, and you know, to bring it back to how we can make a difference, you know, in the work that I'm doing now for Breakthrough, you know, we're committed to being 100% inclusive in our hiring practices, which means that we're either hiring women, people of color, or folks in the LGBTQ community, because the statistics tell us that there is, you know, a very distinct disparity happening behind the camera. And it is important, you know, it is important for us to elevate, amplify, and give that opportunity to folks who are ready. You know, obviously skills and the work come first, but if the skills are there and there's an opportunity, you know, absolutely, you know, it's important to open those doors at this moment. You know, we're in a very critical time, and if we don't own our own narratives, someone else will fill that vacuum with what we have seen in the past. You know, which is I don't even want to repeat, because we're all aware of what those narratives are. You know, I don't want to even say it out loud because I'm so tired of them. But yeah, you know, we're a resilient group of multicultural individuals from a variety of backgrounds as Latinos, and I want to see all of it. You know, I want to see, you know, Afro-Colombian stories. I want to see, you know, indigenous stories from, you know, from Peru, from Mexico. Like, yes, there is so much out there, and you know, and it's so rich. And to think that we're a monolith is like a nightmare. You know, it's a nightmare because we're so far from that. So I'm excited, you know, I'm excited about what's next, and I think it is up to us as filmmakers, and filmmakers, you know, who, like, you know, Alex said, you know, we're often trying to make magic when it comes to figuring out our funding, to raising money, to having access, to, you know, finding support. So whenever we do have that ability, I think it is essential that we take it on.
Yeah, no, it's a great thing you're bringing up, because you'd think that a diverse, multi-talented, multi-ethnic group of people would be tapped more often to say, hey, help us out with this project, right? Or what do you think about this subject? Or what do you have in your skill set that can help us in creating content, right? And bringing content to audiences. And this is part of what this film festival is all about. You know, Pinchy pandemic. You know, if it wasn't for that, y'all would be experiencing this amazing gathering of producers, studio folk, journalists, everybody talking on the sidelines outside of panels and even talking about deals and looking at hey, what's the next thing that you're working on? Maybe I can help you. That's the richness of the film festival. Yeah, obviously we're not going to have it in person this time around, but I'm fully expecting that there are still going to be those kinds of opportunities to make those connections. So I'm going to look for you guys next week and then see what you're up to. And I hope that everybody joins us next week at the film festival. I just want you to let you know a little bit of housekeeping here, that for film tickets, film passes, you can get $5 off using the code DX5OFF on Eventbrite, okay? And for full festival passes, including the industry symposium, and you'll get 10% off of that, is if you use the code DX palabra on Eventbrite. So there's a little bit of a cha-ching for you guys, and hopefully that's enough to get more people to come out and experience this film festival with us. I look forward to seeing you all next week, and during the programming, I want to sit in on the panels and just look at the richness of and the diversity of films and content and discussions that we're going to be having over the next few days. So in the meantime, let's wrap it up. I want to thank each and every one of you, Alex, Priscilla, and Moni. Have a great time at the festival next week. And in the meantime, look to Palabra for the latest in political news and cultural stories from the freelancers who make up a strong portion of the National Association of Hispanic Journalists. Thank you once again for being with us. We'll see you next time.